Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of High Five for Reading. I'm your host Dave. Today we're going to have with us a new special guest. He's going to be sitting in the hot seat and we'll get right to it. So with us today is Tom Rath, author of the book How Full Is Your Bucket? Tom, thanks for being here today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. I work for Gallup Press, which does some of the Gallup polls and a lot of research-based things. I've got my undergraduate degree from the University of Michigan and my graduate degree in psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. I've authored several books, including How Full Is Your Bucket, all focused on the interaction of psychological and interpersonal relationships, both in work and outside of work.
All right. Now, like you mentioned, you have authored several books. Now, this is your first collaborative piece, and you did that with your grandfather, Donald Clifton. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I have the great privilege of being the grandson of a renowned psychologist who authored many books throughout his 40-plus year professionally, and he, towards the end of his life, asked for me to cooperate with him on this particular project, where he wanted to take a concept that he had spoken about for years and had referenced in many of his other writings, but take a dedicated book specifically on this concept. So we co-authored it together. A lot of the concepts belong to my grandfather, things that he and I would talk about outside of the clinical study portion of it. And then he gave me his insights over his last year, and I was able to take those insights and his concepts and put them into the book that we have here today.
So basically the book, How Full Is Your Bucket, is a psychology book?
Well, yes and no. A lot of the concepts are based off of clinical research and clinical studies, but it's not directly, specifically psychology as you would think about in a clinical sense, as much as it is interpersonal communication and relationships, especially within the workplace.
So now you have a theory of the dipper and the bucket. Can you elaborate on that some more?
Yeah, so the concept of the bucket is twofold. One, we all have a bucket. And this bucket is consisted of the positive and negative influences we have. So the fuller our buckets are, and the fuller other people's buckets are, the more positive interaction it tends to be with people. A full bucket is a good bucket. And what happens is we have a tendency as people, when we're negative, we dip into somebody else's bucket with our negative interaction, or we allow other people to dip into our bucket with negative interaction. So the book focuses on how to not dip into other people's bucket, how to not let people dip into your bucket, and how when you're interacting with people to actually pour into their bucket through positive reinforcement.
All right. Now in the book itself, it talks a little bit about why people leave a job. Now, in your guys' expertise, opinion, why would you feel people leave jobs?
So, yeah, this is really kind of an interesting concept that we address in the book is most people initially think that professional working people leave for more money, right? Money's everything. People want to change jobs. They want more money. And research shows that couldn't be the furthest from the truth. Why money can be a large motivating factor for some, that feeling unappreciated or underappreciated at work is really the driving factor for about 65% of people when they leave their job is they just don't feel like they're being appreciated at work, and so they're going to look for those greener pastures someplace else. When we say greener, we don't mean money, we mean greener from a positive influence area. They want to work for somebody who truly appreciates them.
So what kind of mental stress or anything would it cause a bad boss? Because if you work for a bad boss and then you just go home, you kind of take that with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all tend to take what happens at work. I mean, let's face it, we spend a good portion of our adult lives at work, right? And so we take that home with us. And so the negative effects from a bad boss, the increased stress, increased anxiety, that can really be detrimental to your health. And the studies have shown that the negative effects from that boss can increase your risk for stroke and other health effects by up to 33%. But on the opposite side, we talked about the positive effects from filling somebody else's bucket or having your bucket filled by somebody else. Is if you work for a positive boss or a boss who's really good about filling somebody else's bucket, it can actually increase your lifespan but for up to 10%. So it is real important that you find that old saying that the job that you love or something that you love to do, if you do something that you love, you're never going to work a day in your life. It really does have a positive influence on your health as well. Negative influences are going to definitely decrease your life expectancy, where the positive influences are going to increase your life expectancy.
So let's say we do have those people that are working for bad bosses, so to speak. When they're disengaged, like how does that really kind of affect the business as a whole?
So that's a really unique portion of our research. So everybody knows that productivity at work, especially now with the social media and other things that can entice you at work, cost companies a lot of money. So that negative atmosphere we talked about from the health standpoint really does impact how much time you want to spend on social media or talking to your friends or standing around the water cooler or just not being productive at work. And so when you've got that negative boss or that boss that likes to dip into your bucket or never fills your bucket, that disengagement is going to lower your productivity. And then what it also does is we talked about, again, that reason people leave works is from that poor leadership. And when it's that 65% of people who leave from that bad boss, that turnover costs a company money, right? So hiring people, training people, recruiting, a whole process costs a company money. And between those two things, the lower productivity and the increased turnover, we estimate that costs employers between $250 and $300 billion a year annually in lost productivity and increased recruiting and training costs.
So when a company has a negative employee now, does that affect the customers in any way, shape, or form, do you feel?
Yeah, so this was another unique concept that we really focused on. Taking that clinical side of our psychology background, we really did a controlled case study where we were able to work with a telemarketing firm, and that whole piece where this call may be recorded for quality assurance purposes. We listened to those recordings, and they went and did the follow-up and what was the long-term ramifications of the long-term outcome after those calls had come in. And what we found is the people that everybody agreed to were negative sales reps or had that negative interaction with the customers. That really decreased the closure rate on sales. It increased the complaints that came into the company. And ultimately, we found that those customers that had interaction with the negative employees, the customer retention rate was lower. And those customers left, often to never come back, no matter what the best efforts of the company put forward. They were never able to retract those customers. They lost them for life. But on the opposite side, those positive employees, the ones that we know are contributing to other people's buckets, they had higher customer retention rate, higher sales, and when we did put them with other new people, they were able to bring in more customers. So the clear assumption that we would all make, proven in a clinical case study of negative employees negatively impact your customer base and sales, where the positive employees are very beneficial.
So now you talk about filling the bucket. Now, is that part of like appreciation, filling up your buckets? Do you feel that we're doing adequately in as far as that goes?
So again, a unique piece here, 65% of people say that they don't get recognized at work last year in the U.S. And that's a unique piece because a lot of times we all go and look at, well, we've got employee of the month or employee of the year or different sales programs or incentives. If you sell X amount of this widget or that gadget, you're going to get an award or certificate or whatever the case is. So I think naturally we want to think that we do a good job of recognizing our employees. But what our research tells us that 65% of people who say, no, I'm not being recognized is we're not doing it. And so when we say you got to fill people's buckets, not through just an employee of the month program, it can be something as casual as, hey, Dave, great job last week on that particular project, or shooting an email over to somebody and telling them nice work or thank you for your hard effort or I really appreciate you giving 110% last week. It doesn't have to be these big, overwhelming, grandiose rewards. The simple things, the simple affirmations can fill somebody's bucket. Even taking an interest in your employees and simply asking how their son's soccer game was last week can really go a long way with somebody. That's actually a filling of a bucket.
No, I know when I worked my 9 to 5er, I absolutely hated coming in on Mondays because we had Monday Carl. And every Monday, he was really, really negative because he hated Mondays. I mean, does that affect everyone or is it just my office when I worked there?
So absolutely, that negative guy and the water cooler on Monday morning. So 9 out of 10 people are more productive, I should say, when they're around positive people at work. So if you've got the negative Nelly at the water cooler, he's definitely got an impact on the productivity of your building. Or the opposite way, if you've got an office full of people that all work together and get along, so that production is going to definitely go up.
Now, the thing that really, really struck me in the book was how this doesn't only translate into like the work atmosphere. You guys actually did this study with school, right?
Yeah, so some of the research that we did wasn't all of our own. We went back and reanalyzed research that was done previously. And when we found, when you applied this kind of concept of the filling of the bucket to students in an academic sense, is that the countries with the higher academic achievement, especially those higher than the US's achievement levels, they tend to focus more on the positive, recognizing their students for getting the A's, and less focus on those students who maybe got D's and F's, where poorer performing countries, including the U.S., tended to focus more on that negative piece, right? They went right to the D's and the F's on the report card and gave less acknowledgement for the good grades. And we really broke that down even a little bit further and looked at subject specific or like assignment specific. What we saw is when you took students in a math class and focused on the results of a test, and you gave positive affirmation no matter how well they did, those people over the next 5 assignments, they had 71% increase in their scores. Where you took the people who had the negative impact, or tell them they did a bad job, you give them negative reinforcements, they saw a slight increase initially of up to 19%, but that quickly tapered off as that fear factor, for lack of a better term, kind of tapered off, and their progress actually declined. And then we had a third control group that we looked at, and that was simply just giving them no recognition one way or another. And the results there, as you would expect, were pretty marginal. It didn't really change one way or another. So definitely, in an academic sense, that positive reinforcement and the filling of the bucket definitely provides a lot more benefits than that negative reinforcement or the taking out of the student's bucket.
Now, in the book, you guys mentioned the magic ratio of 5-to-1. Can you go into detail on that, or can you give a brief overview of the 5-to-1 magic ratio?
So, yeah, while there's nothing that's ever an exact science, it's going to be different for everybody. What we found was that from both yourself and how you come across and what you need for your bucket and how others need to be received is you don't want to just do one spoonful in, one spoonful out for the filling of the bucket. It really does need to be more positives than negatives. So what we're not saying is you can't ever address the negatives. Certainly if somebody's got developmental opportunities at work, you can address those. But what we're trying to do is 5 positives for 1 negative. And then to the contrary on that is what we can see sometimes, or tend to see after you give a seminar, is everybody goes out and starts giving positive and never addresses the negative. And you can give too much positives. And what we found is after you break that 5, it starts to taper off the benefits you get from that. And once you hit a 13-to-1 ratio, then you're getting almost no return on that positive or that bucket filling. And it actually starts to become detrimental. The person starts to lose productivity because you're just acknowledging them too much.
And now you also talked about 5 different strategies. Once again, can you go in and elaborate on those as well?
All right. So yeah, at the end of the book, we definitely focus on what we want the 5 key takeaway strategies for the readers to take. The first one is to prevent bucket dipping, both other people dipping into your bucket and you dipping into other people's buckets. It's a very important concept from the book. The second strategy we talk about is to shine a light onto what is right. The third strategy is to make best friends. And we don't mean best friends that you're going to go out and socialize outside of work, but you got to make sure that you know and understand the people that you're interacting with and have a little bit of that personal flair and touch with it. The fourth strategy is to just give unexpectedly. When you're filling somebody else's bucket, it doesn't have to be and shouldn't be associated, we talked about, to a specific program. It should be it's just that unexpected feedback or praise or bucket filling. It's definitely more sincere. It is more well received from people in those particular circumstances. And then the fifth strategy is probably one of the most important, I think, and that is the reversal of the golden rule. Everybody knows and understands the golden rule concept of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But when we talk about reversing of the golden rule, we want to make sure that you're doing to others as they would do unto themselves. And when we say that, what we really want you to do is make sure that you're recognizing them in a way that they appreciate being recognized. Some people don't like the public praise. They don't want the fanfare to go along with whatever good job they did. And they can actually be detrimental if you recognize them or fill their bucket in the wrong way. And it's important that you understand part of that portion of, again, making best friends, that you understand the people and that you fill their bucket in the way that they're going to appreciate, and they're going to get a lot more out of reversing that golden rule and dealing with the people in the way that they expect to be or hope to be recognized.
If I wanted to get the book, or how can I find more out about this book?
So yeah, absolutely. So the book, How Full Is Your Bucket, is available on Amazon. You can download it and get the Kindle version. You can also go to Barnes & Noble directly or order it through Barnes & Noble or most any other bookstore around. And one of the great things about the book is it's pretty interactive. It's got some good tools and tips at the end of the book. And then it comes with some online access codes for exclusive content that's going to help you get the most out of it by going over some of your strengths and weaknesses in ways that you maybe are taking from other people's buckets, ways you're letting your bucket be dipped into right now yourself, and how you can fill people's buckets. So it's definitely a great buy, and I recommend that you take it. It's going to be beneficial no matter what sector that you work in.
All right, well, Tom, thanks for coming in today and being a guest on our show.
Thanks a lot for having me, Dave. I appreciate it.